Thomas Wolfe, Hawthorne's muscles tensed as the military transport plane touched down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The familiar runway stretched before him, a sight he dreamed of during countless nights in Afghanistan. 2 weeks ahead of schedule, he allowed himself a rare smile, imagining the surprise on his family's faces. His calloused fingers traced the worn edges of his phone. No messages, no calls, no responses to any of his communications over the past month. The screen remained stubbornly empty, just as it had throughout his final weeks of deployment. He dismissed it as poor connectivity in the field, but something in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive through countless operations, warned him that something was off. The base's relative tranquility felt foreign after 2 years of constant vigilance. No distant explosions, no radio chatter, no perpetual state of readiness. Just the occasional sound of civilian vehicles and the muted conversations of base personnel going about their routine duties. Thomas's mind drifted to his 8-year-old son Nathan. The boy had been just 6 when Thomas deployed, already showing signs of the same iron will that had driven Thomas through Special Forces training. He'd missed Nathan's 7th birthday, his first grade graduation, his first loose tooth, moments he could never get back. But he was home now, ready to make up for lost time. The taxi ride to the suburbs felt interminable. Thomas watched the familiar landmarks pass by, noting small changes in the neighborhood. New businesses, different traffic patterns, subtle shifts that marked the passage of time. The driver, sensing his passenger's military bearing, maintained a respectful silence. As they pulled up to the colonial-style house, Thomas's tactical awareness immediately registered several discrepancies. The garden had changed. Grace's beloved roses, which she'd tenderly cultivated for years, were gone. Generic shrubs stood in their place, a bizarrely impersonal touch for a woman who'd won local gardening awards. The house itself appeared different too, less lived in, despite the maintained lawn and trim bushes. Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor who'd lived next door for decades, stood frozen on her porch. Her expression shifted from shock to something else. Pity? She opened her mouth as if to speak, then quickly retreated inside her house. Thomas paid the driver and retrieved his duffel bag, his combat-honed senses heightening with each step toward the front door. The key turned smoothly in the lock, but the house that greeted him felt wrong. The walls, once adorned with family photographs documenting their life together, stood bare. The familiar scent of Grace's favorite vanilla candles was replaced by a sterile emptiness. Nathan? Grace? His deep voice echoed through the house. The silence that followed lasted only moments before quick footsteps thundered down the stairs. Dad? Dad! Nathan's voice cracked with emotion as he launched himself from the bottom step. Thomas caught his son mid-flight, the boy's smaller frame colliding with his chest. He held Nathan tight, breathing in the scent of his son's hair, feeling the tremors running through the small body. But even in this moment of reunion, his instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. Nathan's embrace carried an edge of desperation, his fingers clutching Thomas's uniform with unusual force. "Hey, buddy, I missed you so much," Thomas managed, fighting to keep his voice steady. He pulled back slightly, studying his son's face. Nathan had grown taller, his features more defined, but there was something in his eyes, a wariness that no 8-year-old should possess. "Where's Mom?" Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. Nathan's entire body tensed at the question. The boy stepped back, his small face contorting with emotions too complex for his age. "Mom's at church," he began, then paused, his lower lip trembling. "Getting married." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow, but years of combat training kept his expression controlled. "What did you say?" His voice remained steady, though every muscle in his body coiled with tension. "To Uncle Steve," Nathan continued, the words tumbling out now. "Your friend Steve. Everyone's there, Grandma and Grandpa Hawthorne, Aunt Rebecca." He stopped, struggling with what came next. "Says what, son?" Thomas prompted, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Nathan's chin lifted, a gesture so like Thomas's own defiant stance that it made his chest ache. "That you're a coward who abandoned us." The boy's voice grew stronger. "But I never believed her, Dad. I knew you'd come back." Thomas's hand rested on his son's shoulder, feeling the slight tremors running through the boy's frame. His mind raced through implications, through betrayals, through the list of people who would pay for this. But first, he needed to be a father. "Nathan, look at me," he commanded, using the same tone that had guided men through combat situations. The boy's eyes met his, searching for reassurance. "I need you to tell me everything. When did this start? What exactly did your mother tell you?" Nathan's story spilled out in fragments. How Steve had started coming over for dinner shortly after Thomas deployed. How Grace had gradually changed. How the family photos had disappeared one by one. The boy's voice cracked when he described overhearing Grace and Steve discussing their plans late one night, thinking he was asleep. "They said you chose the military over us," Nathan whispered. "That you loved war more than family. But I remembered what you told me before you left. That sometimes the hardest thing a man can do is leave the ones he loves to protect them." Thomas's jaw clenched. Every word from his son's mouth was another nail in the coffin of his old life, another betrayal to be answered for. "You did good, son," he said firmly. "You stayed strong. Now it's time for me to do the same." He stood, military training taking over as he formulated his next moves. "Nathan, I need you to make a choice now, and I want you to think carefully about it. Do you want to come with me to the church, or would you rather stay here?" Nathan's response was immediate. "I'm coming with you, Dad. I want to see their faces when they realize you're home." Thomas nodded, pride mixing with the rage building in his chest. "Then let's go show them what real courage looks like." As they walked to the car, Thomas's mind was already racing ahead, calculating angles of attack, identifying weaknesses, planning his assault. He'd spent 2 years fighting enemies in foreign lands, but now he faced a different kind of war. One fought not with bullets and bombs, but with truth and justice. His son's small hand slipped into his as they got into the car. The simple gesture of trust strengthened his resolve. Some men might have broken under this betrayal, might have sought understanding or reconciliation. But Thomas Wolfe Hawthorne wasn't most men. He was a warrior, a leader, a father. And he was about to remind everyone why you don't betray a man who's spent his life mastering the art of war. The drive to St. Michael's Church became a tactical operation in Thomas's mind. Each turn brought new information, new pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with devastating clarity. Steve Morrison, his supposed best friend since their high school football days, the man who'd fought beside him in their first tour, who'd stood as his best man and sworn eternal brotherhood. The memories crashed through his mental barriers. Steve's eager volunteering to watch over Grace and Nathan during the deployment, his insistence on handling their video calls, the way he'd positioned himself as the family's protector in Thomas's absence. The Sunday dinners Grace had mentioned in their increasingly brief conversations, the way she'd grown distant and evasive, always having some excuse to end their calls early. Thomas's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he recalled his sister Rebecca's email from 6 months ago. The message had seemed oddly urgent. "We need to talk about Grace. It's important." He dismissed it as typical family drama, not wanting to be pulled into domestic issues while leading combat operations. Now the words took on a different meaning, a half-hearted attempt at warning that ultimately meant nothing. "Dad," Nathan's voice cut through his thoughts. "Are you angry?" Thomas glanced at his son, noting the worry in the boy's eyes. "Not at you, Nathan. Never at you. But yes, I'm angry at the adults who should have known better, who should have protected our family instead of destroying it. Even Grandma and Grandpa? Especially them." Thomas's voice hardened. "Family means something, son. It means loyalty, honor, trust. Your grandparents watched this happen and said nothing. They chose sides, and they chose wrong." The church parking lot came into view, filled with familiar vehicles that now seemed like enemy positions on a battlefield. His mother's silver Mercedes, always parked precisely in the shade. His father's restored Corvette, the car he'd promised to help Thomas work on when he returned. Steve's Porsche, bought with the profits from the security consulting firm he and Thomas had planned to start together after his service ended. Thomas pulled around to the back of the church, military instincts taking over. "Nathan, listen carefully," he said, turning to face his son. "What's about to happen in there? People might get scared, might get angry. But I need you to remember something. Everything I do to protect what's right. Do you understand?" Nathan nodded, his young face set with determination. Like when you win a war to protect us? Exactly like that. Some battles happen in faraway places with guns and bombs. Others happen right here at home, with words and actions. But the principle is the same. You fight for what's right, and you never back down from the truth. They got out of the car, and Thomas could hear the wedding march beginning to play inside the church. The sound struck him as obscene, a celebration of betrayal, a mockery of everything he'd fought to protect. What are you going to do, Dad? Nathan's small hand slipped into his again, seeking reassurance. Thomas squeezed his son's hand gently. Stay close to me, Nathan. It's time for some truth. His voice carried the same calm authority he'd used to lead men into combat. We're about to teach them all a lesson about consequences. As they approached the side door, Thomas caught their reflection in a window, father and son. One in combat fatigues, the other in casual clothes, both standing straight-backed and determined. In that moment, he saw not just his son but a warrior in training, a boy learning the hardest lessons about honor and betrayal far too early. Remember this moment, son, he said quietly. Remember that sometimes the biggest acts of courage happen not on battlefields, but in moments like this, when we stand up for what's right even when it hurts. Nathan's chin lifted in that familiar gesture of defiance. I'm ready, Dad. Thomas allowed himself one last moment of preparation, mentally mapping out the church's layout, identifying likely positions of key players, calculating angles of approach. The tactical part of his brain, the part that had kept him and his men alive through countless operations, kicked into high gear. The wedding march swelled behind the doors, and Thomas felt a cold smile form on his face. In Afghanistan, he'd earned the nickname Wolf not just for his tactical prowess, but for his ability to strike when enemies least expected it. Now it was time to remind everyone back home exactly why that name struck fear into those who crossed him. Time to crash a wedding, he murmured, and reached for the door. The heavy wooden doors burst open with a thunderous crash that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Thomas stood in the entrance, combat uniform still dusty from the transport plane, Nathan a small but determined presence at his side. The wedding march screeched to a halt mid-note, the organist's fingers frozen over the keys. 200 heads turned in unison, the collective gasp creating a wave of sound that rolled through the church. Thomas registered everything with combat-honed precision. Grace at the altar, resplendent in a designer wedding dress that probably cost more than his annual combat pay. Steve beside her, his tailored tuxedo a far cry from the battle fatigues they'd once shared. The front pew where his parents and sister sat, their faces transforming from celebration to horror in slow motion. Don't let me interrupt. Thomas's voice carried through the stunned silence, each word precise and measured. I just came to congratulate the happy couple. His eyes swept the congregation, recognizing faces that triggered fresh waves of betrayal, and to thank my loving family for their support during my deployment. He began walking down the aisle, each step deliberate and controlled. Nathan matched his pace perfectly, the boy's presence adding an extra layer of damning testimony to the scene. Church members shifted in their pews, whispers erupting like nervous gunfire. Look, there's Sarah from the PDA, Nathan whispered, pointing to a woman who was now trying to disappear into her seat. She helped Mom pick out wedding flowers. And Mr. Johnson from my school. He's been helping Uncle Steve with business stuff. Thomas nodded, cataloging each face, each betrayal. He recognized members of his old high school football team, veterans from the local VFW post, neighbors who'd promised to look after things while he was deployed. All complicit, all aware, all silent. Grace found her voice first, though it trembled with forced confidence. Thomas, she said, her hands clutching her bouquet like a shield. You weren't supposed to be here. Clearly, he reached the altar, looking directly into her eyes. 2 years I spent in combat zones, taking fire, losing men, watching brothers die. His voice remained steady, but carried an edge that made several guests flinch. While you and Steve played house with my son. With my family's blessing. Steve stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture that Thomas remembered from their military days. The same gesture Steve had used when trying to talk down hostile civilians. Brother, let me explain. Thomas's fist connected with Steve's jaw before he could finish the sentence. The impact was precise, calculated, everything he'd learned in close combat training compressed into one perfect strike. Steve sprawled across the altar steps, blood staining his pristine white shirt. Several guests screamed. Grace stumbled backward, almost tripping on her wedding dress. The priest quickly moved to protect the sacred implements on the altar. "I'm not your brother." Thomas's voice cut through the chaos like a combat knife. "Brothers don't steal each other's wives. Brothers don't destroy families." He turned to Grace, who shrank back from his gaze. "And wives don't betray husbands who are fighting for their country." His mother rushed forward, her designer dress rustling as she moved. "Thomas, please. We only want it. Save it." He cut her off, his tone arctic. "You chose your side. All of you did." He looked at his father, who couldn't meet his eyes, then at his sister Rebecca, who was crying silently in the pew. "Now you'll live with the consequences." He turned to address the shocked congregation, his parade ground voice filling every corner of the church. "Let me make sure everyone understands exactly what happened here. My wife and best friend have been having an affair while I served our country. My parents and sister knew and helped hide it. They planned this wedding for the exact time I was supposed to be deployed." He paused, letting each word land like an artillery strike. "Remember their faces. Remember what they did to a soldier who was fighting for them." Nathan's hand tightened in his, and Thomas looked down at his son. The boy's face showed not shame or fear, but pride in a father who stood up for truth, who faced betrayal with strength rather than weakness. Taking Nathan's hand firmly in his, Thomas turned and walked back down the aisle. The congregation parted before them like water, no one daring to meet his eyes. At the doors, he paused and turned one last time. "Grace, Steve, enjoy your special day." His smile would have been familiar to any enemy who'd faced him in combat. "Consider it a declaration of war." As they walked out into the daylight, Nathan looked up at his father. "Are we going home now, Dad?" Thomas shook his head. "No, son. We're going to build a new home, and then we're going to teach them all about justice." Behind them, the church erupted into chaos, but Thomas didn't look back. He'd learned in combat that you never look back once you've launched an attack. You move forward, adapt, overcome, and most importantly, you make your enemies regret ever thinking you were a soft target. The war had begun, and Thomas Wolfe Hawthorne was just getting started. The key turned in the lock of Thomas's new rental house, a modest two-story building across town, far from the haunting emptiness of his former home. Nathan's footsteps echoed through the sparsely furnished rooms as he explored his new territory. "Your room's upstairs, second door on the right," Thomas called out. He placed his laptop on the kitchen counter, already plotting his next moves. The military had taught him that intelligence gathering preceded any successful operation. He needed allies, evidence, and a comprehensive battle plan. His phone buzzed with another message from Grace's lawyer: divorce papers, custody arrangements, attempts to paint him as an unstable veteran. Thomas deleted it without reading. They still thought they were dealing with a conventional enemy. They had no idea what was coming. Major Hawthorne? A sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Marie Rodriguez, former military intelligence. "Lieutenant Colonel Davidson suggested I might be useful." Thomas opened the door to find a compact woman in her 40s, her bearing unmistakably military. She handed him a folder without preamble. "Your situation caught my attention. I've already begun preliminary surveillance." Thomas gestured her inside, appreciating her directness. "What's your initial assessment?" Marie laid out photographs across the counter. "They've been planning this for months. Steve Morrison isn't just a friend who got too close. He's been systematically positioning himself to take over your life." She pointed to various images: Steve and Grace at restaurants, family gatherings, school events. "He's been building relationships with your business contacts, spreading stories about your abandonment of the family. Your parents. They've been actively helping." Thomas's jaw tightened as he examined bank statements showing his parents' financial contributions to the wedding. "How deep does it go?" "Your sister Rebecca acted as their realtor. Marie pulled out property listings. She's been helping them house hunt while you were deployed." They're planning to move into the Riverside district, using your share of the business profits as down payment. Nathan's voice drifted down from upstairs. Dad, where should I put my books? I'll be right there, son. Thomas turned back to Marie. What about Nathan? What are their plans for him? Marie's expression hardened. They're preparing to file for full custody, planning to use your military service against you, painting you as an absent father who chose war over family. They've been coaching Nathan, trying to turn him against you. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. They really have no idea what they're dealing with, do they? No, Marie agreed. They think they're facing a broken soldier. They don't realize they're up against a tactical expert who specializes in dismantling enemy operations. Thomas began organizing the photos. I need everything: their movements, communications, financial records. Every weakness, every pressure point, every skeleton in their closets. Already on it, Marie pulled out her laptop. Steve's business dealings aren't as clean as they appear. He's been cutting corners, falsifying documents. Your parents' social standing? Built on carefully maintained lies. Grace's teaching career? There are some interesting complaints buried in her personnel file. Thomas nodded, military planning mode fully engaged. Time to show them what real psychological warfare looks like. But first, he picked up a photo of Steve and Grace at a country club event. Tell me about their routines, their social circles. Everyone who enabled this betrayal. For the next hour, they mapped out the enemy terrain. Marie's intelligence was comprehensive. Credit card statements showing expensive dinners, hotel receipts, text messages retrieved from cloud backups. A complete picture of betrayal laid bare in digital footprints. There's something else you should see. Marie hesitated. Your family's group chat messages. They've been discussing how to handle your return, assuming you survive deployment. Thomas read through the messages, his expression growing colder with each line. His mother's concerned messages about making the transition easier. His father's financial advice to Steve about managing the anticipated inheritance. His sister's suggestions for handling the inevitable confrontation. They thought they had it all planned out, Thomas said quietly. The grieving widow finding comfort, the devoted friend stepping up, the supportive family helping them heal. A perfect narrative for their social circle. Instead, they got the wolf. Marie smiled grimly. Want to hear my proposal for Phase 1? Thomas returned her smile, the same smile that had unnerved enemies in combat zones. Let's start with Steve's business empire. Tell me about these fraudulent contracts. Marie pulled up financial documents. He's been using your projected partnership to secure investments. The numbers don't add up. One anonymous tip to the SEC. Not yet. Thomas held up a hand. First, I want a complete map of everyone involved. Every investor, every client, every social connection. When we strike, we destroy the entire network. Nathan came downstairs, pausing at the sight of Marie. Thomas made the introductions. Ms. Rodriguez is helping us make things right, son. Nathan studied her with surprising maturity. Are you going to help Dad fight them? That's right, Marie answered. Your dad's a strategic expert. We're going to make sure everyone learns why you don't betray a soldier. Thomas watched his son absorb this, seeing the same determination he felt reflected in the boy's eyes. Nathan, remember what I taught you about military operations? Gather intelligence, identify weaknesses, plan the attack, show no mercy to the enemy, Nathan recited. Exactly. Thomas ruffled his hair. Now go finish unpacking. We've got work to do. After Nathan went upstairs, Marie raised an eyebrow. He's handling this well. He's a soldier's son, Thomas said simply. He understands loyalty and betrayal better than they ever will. He turned back to the evidence. Show me everything you have on Steve's investors. It's time to start dismantling his empire. Thomas sat in his home office, monitoring multiple screens as his carefully orchestrated plan unfolded. Marie's intelligence had been flawless, each piece of evidence strategically deployed for maximum impact. The first anonymous tip reached Steve's largest investor at 9 a.m., detailed documentation of fraudulent practices, inflated projections, and misappropriated funds. By 9:30, 3 more major investors received similar packages. The timing was precise. coordinated for simultaneous impact. Thomas's phone buzzed. A text from Marie. Phase 1 initiated. Watching Steve's office now. Through Marie's surveillance feed, Thomas watched Steve's increasingly panicked movements. The man who'd stolen his life was about to learn about real warfare. By noon, Steve's carefully constructed business empire began showing cracks. The phone calls started rolling in. Nervous investors demanding explanations, partners pulling out of deals, banks freezing accounts pending investigation. Steve's assistant quit dramatically, having received an anonymous email about her boss's history of harassment claims. Thomas allowed himself a small smile as he composed the next series of tips. His sister Rebecca's real estate dealings weren't as ethical as she pretended. Anonymous complaints to the licensing board detailed multiple violations: insider trading, hidden fees, fraudulent documentation. Dad. Nathan stood in the doorway. Uncle Steve's on TV. Thomas turned up the volume on the local news. Steve stood outside his office building, sweating in his expensive suit, attempting to explain away the mounting allegations. His confident facade cracked as reporters shouted questions about fraudulent contracts and misappropriated veteran benefits. "Is this part of your plan?" Nathan asked, studying the screen. "This is just the beginning," Thomas replied. "Remember what happens to people who betray trust? They lose everything," Nathan said firmly. "That's right." Thomas checked another alert. His parents' country club had received an interesting package of documents, evidence of his father's inappropriate behavior with young staff members, along with proof of covered-up incidents. Marie's next update confirmed the impact. Country club membership revoked. Your mother's social standing in freefall. Rebecca's real estate license suspended pending investigation. Thomas typed out his next instruction. Release the school board documents. Within hours, Grace's carefully crafted image as the abandoned military wife began unraveling. Anonymous sources provided the school board with detailed documentation of her affair with a married man while his wife served overseas. The local veterans groups, already furious about the wedding incident, began showing up at every social event Grace and Steve attended. They shared stories of Thomas's heroism, of battles fought and brothers lost while Steve played house with a deployed soldier's wife. Thomas worked, each strike precisely calculated. Steve's business partners received evidence of his stolen valor, exaggerated military service claims, appropriated war stories. Local news outlets got anonymous tips about the family's betrayal of a decorated soldier. The pressure mounted steadily. Grace's social media filled with messages from military spouses expressing their disgust. Steve's professional network dissolved as colleagues distanced themselves from the growing scandal. "You're destroying them," Marie observed during their evening briefing. "Steve's company stock has dropped 60%. Grace is on administrative leave. Your parents are social pariahs." "No," Thomas corrected her, his voice cold. "They destroyed themselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." He pulled up their next target list. Time for Phase 2. Marie studied the new intelligence. "Your father's business partners might object to these revelations. They should have thought of that before they financed my wife's wedding to my best friend." Thomas's tone remained clinical, detached. "Upload the documents at midnight." The psychological warfare continued relentlessly. Every social event became a minefield. Veterans appeared at restaurants where Grace dined, sharing loud conversations about loyalty and honor. Business meetings where Steve pitched to investors were interrupted by former soldiers, asking pointed questions about his military claims. Thomas monitored it all from his command center, directing each strike with tactical precision. Nathan watched and learned, absorbing lessons about consequences and justice. "Your mom called," Thomas mentioned one evening. "She's begging for a meeting." Nathan looked up from his homework. "Are you going to talk to her?"
No.
Thomas showed him the latest intelligence report. "She's trying to gather sympathy for their counterattack. But we're ready for that too." The report detailed Grace and Steve's desperate attempts to salvage their reputations. Emergency meetings with lawyers, frantic calls to media contacts, attempts to spin the story as persecution by an unstable veteran. "They still think they can win this," Marie noted. Thomas's smile was predatory. "They haven't figured it out yet. In war, you don't just defeat the enemy. You take away their ability to fight back." The lawsuit arrived exactly as Thomas had predicted. Grace and Steve's lawyers filed for emergency custody, painting him as an unstable veteran devastated by betrayal. His parents submitted sworn statements about his violent outburst at the church. The local papers picked up the story, questioning whether a combat veteran with anger issues should have custody. Thomas read the court documents without expression, noting how they'd twisted every fact to support their narrative. His punch at the wedding became uncontrolled violence. His tactical dismantling of their lives became dangerous obsession. "They're calling you unstable," Marie reported, monitoring the media coverage. "Claiming PTSD, suggesting you're a threat to Nathan." Right on schedule, Thomas pulled up his prepared countermeasures. Time to show them what real preparation looks like. The custody hearing took place in a packed courtroom. Grace's lawyer presented their case first, weaving a story of a troubled veteran unable to handle betrayal, a danger to himself and others. Steve testified about Thomas's aggressive tendencies, carefully omitting his own role in the betrayal. Thomas sat calmly, watching their performance. Nathan stayed close to his side, refusing to sit with Grace despite her tearful requests. The boy's loyalty was unmistakable. When Thomas's turn came, he unleashed his own artillery. Colonel James Davidson, his commanding officer, took the stand first. The decorated officer's testimony was devastating. "Major Hawthorne is one of the finest officers I've ever commanded," Davidson stated firmly. "His psychological evaluations are exemplary. His control under pressure is legendary. The idea that he's unstable is not just false. It's an insult to every soldier who serves with honor." More witnesses followed, fellow soldiers testifying about Thomas's leadership and stability, military psychologists confirming his excellent mental health, child development experts praising his parenting despite deployment challenges. Then came the evidence about Grace and Steve's custody preparations. Documentation of their attempts to alienate Nathan, recordings of them coaching him to lie about his father, evidence of their plan to use the courts to separate a soldier from his son. The veterans in the gallery muttered angrily as each betrayal was exposed. Grace's face grew paler with each revelation. Steve's confident expression crumbled as his carefully constructed narrative collapsed. Finally, Nathan took the stand. The boy stood straight, his father's strength evident in his bearing. "They told me to lie about my dad," he testified clearly. "Mom and Uncle Steve said to say he was scary and mean. They wanted me to tell the judge that he hurt me." His voice grew stronger. "But my dad's a hero. They're the liars." Grace burst into tears. Steve tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a look. Thomas's parents sat stunned as their grandson's testimony demolished their claims. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. Thomas would retain primary custody. Grace's visitation would be supervised. Her attempts to alienate Nathan from his father would be noted in all future custody considerations. Outside the courtroom, Grace caught Thomas's arm. "Why are you doing this? We could have worked something out." Thomas looked at her with cold eyes. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything I fought for. Everything I believed in." His voice carried the same tone he'd used with enemies in combat. "Actions have consequences, Grace. You're about to learn exactly what those are." Marie joined them as Grace fled in tears. "They'll appeal the ruling. Let them." Thomas watched his ex-wife's retreat. "Every appeal gives us another opportunity to expose their lies. Every legal challenge digs them deeper into the hole they created." Nathan took his father's hand. "Did we win?" Thomas squeezed his son's hand. "This battle, yes. But the war isn't over yet." He turned to Marie. "Time for the next phase. Let's show them what a real counterattack looks like." The message was clear. Thomas Wolfe Hawthorne didn't just fight battles. He destroyed those who betrayed him, systematically and completely. The custody hearing was just another victory in his campaign of total warfare against those who had thought him an easy target. As they left the courthouse, Thomas already had his next strikes planned. Grace and Steve had tried to use the legal system against him. Now they would learn why enemies feared his strategic expertise. The war would continue until nothing remained of their comfortable, betrayal-built world. Marie Rodriguez strode into Thomas's office, a thick folder tucked under her arm. Her expression conveyed a predator's satisfaction. "You need to see this," she announced, spreading photographs across his desk. Steve's getting desperate. The surveillance photos revealed Steve meeting with increasingly questionable business contacts in dimly lit parking lots and empty warehouses. Financial records showed large transfers from offshore accounts, loan applications with inflated numbers. "He's borrowing money from some dangerous people," Marie explained, tapping one particular photo. "3 meetings last week with known loan sharks. He's trying to salvage what's left of his empire." Thomas examined the documents. "Show me the contracts." Marie pulled out a stack of papers. Forged signatures, backdated documents, fraudulent certifications. He's not even trying to hide it anymore. Just throwing money at anyone who might help him stay afloat. "And my dear family?" Thomas's voice carried the same cold efficiency he'd used when planning combat operations. "They're cracking." Marie's smile held no warmth. "Your parents are fighting constantly. Your mother blames your father for supporting Steve's business ventures. He blames her for encouraging Grace. They've stopped appearing in public together." She pulled up surveillance footage on her tablet. "Your sister Rebecca's marriage is falling apart. Her husband discovered she used their savings to help finance Grace and Steve's house purchase. He's filed for divorce. Grace, drinking heavily. Missed 3 supervised visits with Nathan. Her lawyers threatening to quit because she can't pay the bills." Marie paused. She tried to get a job at another school district, but our anonymous tips about her history followed her. Thomas nodded, satisfied. The pieces were falling perfectly into place. Through the office window, he could see Nathan playing basketball in their new backyard. The boy had grown stronger in recent months, free from the weight of lies and manipulation. "There's something else," Marie added. "Steve's been claiming combat experience to secure military contracts, telling war stories that sound suspiciously like your missions." Thomas's expression hardened. Stolen valor on top of everything else. Time to end this. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd been saving. "Diana, right? Major Thomas Hawthorne. I have a story about betrayal, stolen valor, and justice that might interest you." The journalist's response was immediate. "The wedding interruption at St. Michael's? That was you? That was just the beginning. How'd you like an exclusive on what happened next?" Diana's voice sharpened with professional hunger. "I'm listening." Private investigators report, financial documents, surveillance photos, evidence of fraud, stolen valor, and conspiracy to alienate a child from his deployed father. Everything verified and documented. Military angle? Betrayed soldier, faithless wife, fake war hero, complete with testimony from my commanding officer and fellow soldiers about my actual combat record compared to Steve's fabricated one, church wedding photos, including shots of my parents and sister celebrating while I was dodging bullets in Afghanistan. Diana's excitement was palpable. "This is Pulitzer material, Major. When can we meet?" "Tomorrow. Bring your photographer." Thomas's voice carried absolute certainty. Time to show the world what happens when you betray a soldier's trust. After hanging up, he turned to Marie. "Coordinate with Diana. Make sure she gets everything. Bank records, surveillance photos, court transcripts. I want no detail left uncovered. Full exposure?" Marie clarified. "No holds barred." "They chose this war," Thomas replied. "Now they'll see it through to the end." Nathan came inside, sweaty from basketball. "Dad? Can we get pizza tonight?" Thomas smiled at his son, the one pure thing left from his old life. "Sure, buddy. But first, I need you to understand something. Things are about to get intense again. People will be talking about us, about what happened." Nathan's young face showed mature comprehension. "Because you're going to tell everyone the truth?" "Exactly. The whole truth. Are you ready for that?" The boy straightened, unconsciously mimicking his father's military bearing. "They're the ones who should be scared, not us." "Right, Dad. That's right, son." Thomas shared a look with Marie. They're about to learn the difference between their comfortable lies and real combat. Marie gathered her documents. "I'll coordinate with Diana, set up a secure location for the interview. Want me to leak anything to the press beforehand? Build anticipation?" "No," Thomas decided. "Let it hit them all at once. Maximum impact. After she left, Thomas stood at his window, watching the setting sun paint the sky in deep purples and reds. Everything he'd done, the intelligence gathering, the strategic strikes, the calculated pressure, had led to this moment. The final offensive was about to begin. "Dad." Nathan's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Are Mom and Uncle Steve going to jail?" Thomas turned to his son, seeing the same tactical awareness he'd cultivated in his best troops. "They're going to face consequences, Nathan. Real ones. That's what happens when you choose betrayal over loyalty." The boy nodded solemnly. "Good." No tears, no confusion. Just the pure, clear judgment of a child who'd learned about honor from his father's actions rather than empty words. Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from Marie. "Diana's ready. All pieces in position." He sent a single-word reply. "Execute." The endgame was about to begin. Thomas Wolfe Hawthorne had learned patience in combat, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now that moment had arrived, and his enemies would finally understand why his men had named him after nature's most ruthless predator. Diana Wright's article hit the morning news cycle like a precision-guided missile. The headline alone was devastating: "Betrayal of Honor. How a Decorated Special Forces Officer's Family Conspired Against Him During Deployment." The story opened with the dramatic wedding interruption, but quickly delved deeper. Diana's investigation exposed everything: the affair's timeline, the family's complicity, Steve's financial crimes, the attempted custody theft. Each revelation was backed by irrefutable evidence from Marie's investigation. Thomas watched the fallout from his office, monitoring multiple news feeds. Local stations led with the story. Military blogs exploded with outrage. Veterans groups across the country shared the article, adding their own condemning commentary. The photo spread was particularly damning. Grace and Steve at restaurants while Thomas was deployed. His parents celebrating their engagement. His sister Rebecca showing them houses. All dated, all documented, all painting a clear picture of calculated betrayal. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from fellow officers. "Saw the article. They'll burn for this." Command is livid about Morrison's stolen valor claims. "Entire battalion stands with you, Wolf." Marie arrived mid-morning with updates. Steve's remaining business partners are jumping ship. 3 board members resigned this morning. Stocks in free fall. Grace. School board called an emergency meeting. They're voting to terminate her contract. Too much public pressure. Marie checked her tablet. Your parents' country club officially revoked their membership. Your father's golf buddies are publicly denouncing him. Thomas nodded, satisfied. Rebecca? Her real estate agency fired her an hour ago. Her husband's divorce attorney is having a field day with the revelations about her financial misconduct. The article had been expertly crafted. Diana portrayed Thomas as the dedicated soldier and father, serving his country while his support system crumbled into betrayal. She contrasted his combat records with Steve's stolen valor, his sacrifices with his family's scheming. But the real damage came from the criminal investigations the article sparked. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division announced an interest in Steve's business dealings. The military launched an investigation into his claims of combat experience. The State Bar opened an inquiry into Grace's sworn custody statements. Thomas's phone rang. "Colonel Davidson. Hell of a story, Wolf. Thank you for your contributions, sir. Military community's solidly behind you. We take care of our own." Davidson's voice hardened. "Morrison's finished. Using your combat stories to secure contracts? That's not just stolen valor. That's fraud." The colonel paused. "Your parents tried to reach out through command channels. Want to arrange a meeting?" "No contact," Thomas replied firmly. "They chose their side." "Understood. Keep your guard up. Wounded animals are the most dangerous." As if confirming Davidson's warning, Marie arrived with more updates. "Steve's trying to hold an emergency press conference, claiming the article is a smear campaign." Thomas allowed himself a cold smile. "Put it on." The office TV showed Steve outside his company headquarters, sweating through his expensive suit. His attempted defense crumbled as reporters hammered him with specific details from Diana's article. "Is it true you claimed Major Hawthorne's combat experiences as your own? Did you begin the affair while he was deployed?" How long were you planning to marry his wife before his return? Did you use his expected deployment death to secure business deals? Steve's polished facade cracked completely. He shoved a camera aside and retreated into the building, ignoring shouted questions about fraud investigations and stolen valor. Grace's attempt at damage control fared no better. Her tearful interview about being a misunderstood woman seeking comfort was immediately countered by evidence of her systematic manipulation of Nathan and her attempts to deny Thomas custody. Thomas's parents faced their own tsunami of social destruction. Country club friends, business associates, and social peers abandoned them en masse. Their carefully constructed world of privilege and prestige collapsed under the weight of their exposed betrayal. Nathan returned from school, his backpack covered in supportive messages from classmates. "Everyone read the article, Dad. They all say you're a hero." Thomas hugged his son. "Remember what I taught you about justice? It's not about revenge," Nathan recited. "It's about consequences." "Exactly." Thomas checked his phone as more updates rolled in. "We show people the truth, then let them face what they've done." Marie brought in afternoon reports. Military contractors were canceling deals with Steve's company. Grace's teaching license was under review. The FBI had executed search warrants on Steve's offices. "They're running out of options," Marie observed. "Good." Thomas's voice carried the same tone he'd used when cornering enemy forces. "Now we wait for their desperate counterattack." It came sooner than expected. Steve attempted to transfer massive sums to offshore accounts, triggering federal banking alerts. Grace tried to flee with Nathan during a supervised visit, only to be stopped by the veterans Thomas had stationed nearby. Thomas watched it all with calculated satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. His enemies were destroying themselves, their every desperate move further exposing their true nature. Diana called with updates about her article's impact. "It's going national, Major. Every major network wants to run with it. Veterans organizations are demanding congressional inquiry into stolen valor cases. Keep pushing," Thomas instructed. "I want no stone left unturned." By evening, the destruction was complete. Steve's company stock had collapsed. Grace faced criminal charges for the attempted custody interference. Thomas's parents retreated to their vacation home, hounded by reporters and shunned by former friends. Marie brought in the final reports of the day. "Want to see something interesting?" Security footage from Steve's office. The video showed Steve destroying documents, screaming at board members, finally breaking down at his desk as his empire crumbled. In one satisfying moment, he tried to access accounts Thomas had already frozen, realizing too late how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. "Should we be concerned about retaliation?" Marie asked. Thomas shook his head. "They're finished. They just don't know it yet." Diana's article had pulled the first thread, but Thomas's meticulous planning had ensured the entire tapestry of lies would unravel. As he watched the evening news coverage, he felt no satisfaction, no joy, only the cold certainty of a mission successfully executed. Nathan sat beside him, watching the reports with unusually adult understanding. "They thought they could hurt us, didn't they, Dad?" "They thought I was just a soldier," Thomas corrected. "They forgot that soldiers are trained to fight wars. All kinds of wars." The news showed more footage. Steve being served with federal warrants, Grace being escorted from her school, Thomas's parents facing a mob of reporters. The comfortable world they'd built on betrayal was burning, and Thomas had only begun his campaign of destruction. 1 year to the day after the failed wedding, Thomas sat in his office reviewing the final reports. The timing wasn't accidental. He believed in symmetry when it came to justice. His desk held the remnants of his enemy's destruction. Steve's plea bargain agreement, accepting limited jail time in exchange for cooperation with federal investigations. His business empire had crumbled, his reputation destroyed, his stolen valor exposed to the military community he'd tried to deceive. Grace's file was equally satisfying. She'd moved to another state after multiple failed attempts to rebuild her teaching career. Her supervised visitation with Nathan had been reduced after several missed appointments and one attempted flight risk incident. The courts had noted her continued pattern of destructive behavior. Thomas's parents had divorced, their social standing annihilated. His father faced investigations into business practices that Thomas's evidence had exposed. His mother retreated to a small apartment, abandoned by the society friends who'd once celebrated Grace and Steve's wedding. Rebecca's life lay in similar ruins. Her real estate career ended with her license revocation. Her marriage collapsed under the weight of financial misconduct revelations. She tried to reach out once, sending a tearful letter about family and forgiveness. Thomas had returned it unopened. A knock at his door interrupted his review. Marie entered, followed by Diana Wright. Both women had become more than allies during the past year. They were now partners in his legitimate security consulting firm. The last lawsuit was dismissed today, Marie announced, dropping the final court documents on his desk. Steve's former investors tried one last appeal. Judge threw it out in record time. It's over, Diana added. Her article had launched her career into national prominence, leading to a book deal about military family betrayal. How does it feel? Thomas turned to the photos on his desk, new ones, showing him and Nathan at baseball games, camping trips, school events. The haunted look had vanished from his son's face, replaced by genuine happiness. His calendar showed an upcoming date with Jessica, a military widow he'd met through his veterans support work. It feels like justice, he said simply. Some people think forgiveness heals all wounds. But sometimes, consequences teach better lessons. His security firm had flourished, built on the reputation for ruthless efficiency he'd demonstrated in destroying his betrayers. He hired fellow veterans, teaching them to apply military precision to civilian operations. Their first contract had been particularly satisfying, training corporate executives on ethical leadership and loyalty. The afternoon sun angled through his office window as Nathan arrived from school. The boy had grown taller, stronger, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd seen justice prevail. Dad, Nathan paused in the doorway. Can I ask you something? Of course, son. Are you still angry at Mom and everyone? Thomas considered the question carefully, aware of Marie and Diana's attention. No, buddy. Anger burns you up inside. I'm not angry anymore. I just made sure they faced the consequences of their choices. That's what real strength is. Not hurting people, but making sure justice is served. Nathan nodded, understanding in his young face. I'm glad you came home early that day. Me too, son. Thomas smiled. Me too. After Nathan went to start his homework, Diana gathered her notes. Mind if I use that quote about justice and consequences? It's perfect for the book's conclusion. Feel free. Thomas stood, surveying his rebuilt world. They thought they could betray a soldier without consequences. They learned otherwise. Marie checked her tablet one last time. Final statistics? Steve's net worth down 97%. Grace unemployed in 3 states. Your parents lost approximately $12 million in assets and social connections. Rebecca filing for bankruptcy. Complete destruction, just as planned. Not destruction, Thomas corrected. Justice. They destroyed their own world the moment they chose betrayal. I just made sure they couldn't hide from the consequences. The day wound down, his office quieting as staff departed. Thomas completed the last performance reviews for his veteran employees, signed off on new contracts, and prepared to head home. Nathan waited by the door, backpack ready. Pizza night? Pizza night, Thomas confirmed. They had traditions now, stable routines that helped heal the wounds of betrayal. As they walked to the car, Thomas saw his reflection in the window. Not a bitter man consumed by revenge, but a warrior who'd fought for justice and won. The price of betrayal had been paid in full. His enemies were destroyed, their comfortable world reduced to ashes. But Thomas had built something stronger from those ashes, a life founded on truth and honor, not betrayal and lies. As they drove home, Nathan discussed his history project about military heroes. I wrote about you, Dad. About how you fight for what's right, not just in war but here too. Thomas glanced at his son, seeing the man he would become. What did you learn from everything that happened? That loyalty matters, Nathan replied without hesitation. And that real strength isn't about hurting people. It's about making sure everyone faces the consequences of their choices. They pulled into their driveway, and Thomas noticed Jessica's car parked outside. She stood on the porch, her military bearing evident even in casual clothes. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on shared understanding of service and sacrifice. "I brought study materials for Nathan's math test," she called out. "And maybe some ice cream." Nathan rushed inside, leaving Thomas and Jessica on the porch. She'd become part of their lives gradually, never trying to replace Grace, but offering something entirely new: honest partnership based on mutual respect. "I saw the final court results," she said quietly. "Congratulations. Or is that the right word?" "It's finished," Thomas replied. "That's enough." Inside, Nathan had already spread his books across the kitchen table. Thomas watched him work, remembering the frightened boy who'd revealed his mother's betrayal a year ago. That boy was gone, replaced by a confident young man who understood the true meaning of strength and honor. The evening passed peacefully: homework, dinner, family time untainted by lies or manipulation. As Nathan headed up to bed, he hugged Thomas tightly. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Never forget what we learned this year." "Never," Nathan promised. "We're warriors, right? We fight for what's right." After Nathan went upstairs, Jessica helped Thomas clean up. "You've built something good here," she observed. "From all that pain, you created this." Thomas nodded. The victory wasn't in destroying his enemies. It was in building this new life, showing Nathan that justice prevailed, and surrounding themselves with people who understood true loyalty. He'd lost his old family, but he'd gained something more valuable: truth, justice, and a chance to show his son what real honor looked like. The price of betrayal had been paid in full, and now it was time to build something new. The autumn sun set outside their window, painting the sky in colors of healing and hope. Thomas Wolfe Hawthorne had won his war, not through forgiveness, but through ruthless pursuit of justice. His enemies would carry their scars forever, while he moved forward, stronger than ever. Epilogue. 5 years later, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Wolfe Hawthorne stood at the podium, addressing the graduating class of the military academy. At 45, his presence commanded even more respect than before, his reputation legendary not just for his combat service, but for the way he'd systematically destroyed those who betrayed him. "Honor isn't just a word," he told the cadets. "It's the foundation of everything we do. In combat and in life, you're defined by your choices and their consequences." In the audience, 13-year-old Nathan sat between Mary Rodriguez and Jessica, now Jessica Hawthorne. The boy had grown into a teenager who carried himself with military precision, already planning his own future service career. The past 5 years had proven that karma was indeed ruthless when properly managed. Thomas kept meticulous records of his enemy's downfall, not out of bitterness, but as object lessons and consequences. Grace lived in a small apartment in Arizona, working as a waitress after failing to rebuild her teaching career. Her attempts to find employment and education were consistently thwarted by the viral articles about her betrayal of a deployed soldier. Her supervised visitation with Nathan had ended 2 years ago when she failed to appear for 6 consecutive scheduled meetings. Last Thomas heard, she tried to contact Nathan through social media, creating fake accounts that Marie's security team quickly identified and blocked. Her carefully crafted image of the abandoned military wife seeking comfort had become a cautionary tale in military spouse support groups. Steve Morrison's fall had been even more spectacular. After serving 18 months for financial fraud, he emerged to find every door closed. Military contractors blacklisted him. Veterans organizations ensured his stolen valor became his primary identity. No reputable business would touch him after Diana Wright's series of exposé articles went national. He'd attempted to restart in 3 different cities, using various business names, but Thomas's network of veterans and intelligence specialists tracked each move. Anonymous tips to potential clients and partners consistently revealed his history of betrayal and fraud. Now he lived in a rundown apartment in Cleveland, working as a used car salesman. A fitting job, Thomas thought, for someone so skilled at selling lies. His attempt to write a tell-all book had backfired spectacularly when Diana Wright published a detailed fact-check, destroying what remained of his credibility. Thomas's parents had fared no better. Their divorce had devolved into a bitter fight over rapidly dwindling assets. His father's business partners, worried about guilt by association, had forced him into early retirement. His mother lost her position on every charity board and social committee she'd once dominated. They sent birthday cards to Nathan every year. Each one was returned unopened, marked "No contact ordered by court." Their attempts to rebuild their social standing in a new city collapsed when Thomas's Veterans Network ensured their history followed them. Rebecca, his sister, had tried to reinvent herself after her divorce and bankruptcy. She'd moved to Seattle, attempting to start a life coaching business. The irony wasn't lost on Thomas when her promotional materials emphasized integrity and family values. It took one anonymous email with links to the archived news stories about her role in the betrayal to end her new venture before it began. She worked now as a receptionist, her dreams of real estate success permanently destroyed. Marie Rodriguez had transformed their successful intelligence operation into the country's premier corporate security firm. Wolf Security specialized in catching corporate spies and fraudsters, their military precision and ruthless efficiency making them the go-to choice for major companies. "Your father's methods are being taught at business schools now," Marie told Nathan during the academy graduation reception. Course is called Strategic Response to Corporate Betrayal. They use his systematic dismantling of Steve's business empire as a case study. Diana Wright's book, The Wolf's War, A Soldier's Response to Betrayal, had spent 40 weeks on the bestseller list. The film rights sold for 7 figures, though Thomas had only agreed to cooperate if the story emphasized the consequences of betrayal rather than sensationalizing the revenge aspect. "The studio wants to do a sequel," Diana mentioned, joining them at their table. "Focus on the aftermath, show how your targets never recovered." Grace gave an interview last month, still trying to paint herself as the victim. Nobody's buying it anymore. Thomas's marriage to Jessica 3 years ago had given Nathan the stable family environment he deserved. A military widow who understood service and sacrifice, she'd never tried to replace Grace's role, instead building her own relationship with Nathan based on honesty and shared values. "Dad's speaking at my school next month," Nathan announced proudly. "Career Day. Half my class signed up for the military because of him." Thomas watched his son with quiet pride. The boy who'd revealed his mother's betrayal had grown into a young man who understood honor wasn't just about following rules. It was about ensuring justice prevailed. The family's new home, a restored Victorian in an exclusive neighborhood, stood as a physical testament to their triumph. Thomas's study displayed the evidence of his victory, framed newspaper articles about Steve's conviction, Grace's teaching license revocation, his parents' social extinction. Some people called it revenge, Thomas told his academy audience, concluding his speech. They missed the point. This was about consequences. About ensuring that betrayal carries a price too high to risk paying. His security firm had expanded globally, with offices in major cities worldwide. They specialized in what Thomas called consequence management, helping clients ensure that those who betrayed them faced appropriate repercussions. Marie's network of intelligence specialists tracked Thomas's enemies, providing regular updates on their continued downfall. Grace's latest boyfriend had left her after discovering her history through an anonymous email. Steve's attempt to move to Canada had been thwarted when his past mysteriously surfaced during immigration screening. Thomas's parents had been forced to sell their vacation homes, their retirement funds depleted by failed investments and legal fees. They lived now in a modest condo in Florida, their social circle reduced to other pariahs who couldn't afford to shun them. Rebecca's daughter, Thomas's niece, had found the articles about her mother's betrayal during a school research project. The resulting family conflict had forced Rebecca to change jobs again, moving to a smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. The thing about consequences, Thomas explained to a journalist doing a 5-year retrospective, is that they don't end. Each choice creates ripples that affect every aspect of your life. My enemies chose betrayal. They'll spend the rest of their lives experiencing the results of that choice. Nathan's academic and athletic achievements filled Thomas with pride. The boy had earned early acceptance to the military academy, his essay about learning honor through his father's response to betrayal earning special recognition. Jessica's military support organization had grown into a national network, helping service members' families maintain strong relationships during deployment. She used Grace's story as a warning, showing how betrayal destroyed not just marriages but entire family networks. Your father's requirements for the movie were very specific, Diana told Nathan during the reception. No dramatic monologues about revenge, no action movie cliches. Just the cold, methodical reality of a tactical expert ensuring betrayal carries appropriate consequences. Thomas's approach had become legendary in military circles. Young officers sought his mentorship, learning that true strength lay not in emotional outbursts, but in strategic response to betrayal. The Wolf Protocol, as Marie's security firm called it, had been refined into a comprehensive system for dealing with betrayal in corporate settings. Identify vulnerabilities, gather evidence, apply precise pressure, and maintain consistent consequences, she explained to clients. Thomas's enemies had learned too late that betraying a military strategist carried implications beyond their understanding. Their comfortable world hadn't just been destroyed. It had been systematically dismantled in a way that prevented any possibility of rebuilding. The greatest victory, Thomas told Nathan as they left the academy grounds, isn't in destroying your enemies. It's in ensuring they spend every day understanding exactly why their destruction was inevitable. Grace's latest attempt to modify the visitation agreement had been denied. The judge cited her pattern of instability and failure to acknowledge responsibility for her actions. Her lawyer had withdrawn from the case after his firm received anonymous information about her history of missed payments. Steve's third marriage had ended after his new wife discovered news archives about his betrayal of a deployed soldier. His attempts to date through online services were consistently thwarted by mysterious leaks about his past. Thomas's parents had tried to attend Nathan's middle school graduation, hoping to reconcile. They'd been stopped at the entrance by Marie's security team, their invitations exposed as forgeries created by Rebecca. Sometimes people ask if I miss my old family, Nathan told a counselor during his academy entrance interview. I don't. They chose betrayal over loyalty. Dad taught me that choices have consequences, and their consequences aren't my responsibility. The Wolf Security corporate headquarters stood as a testament to Thomas's success. 20 stories of gleaming glass and steel, employing hundreds of veterans who understood the importance of loyalty and consequences. Marie's intelligence network had expanded to every major city, ensuring that Thomas's enemies could never escape their past. Every job application, every loan request, every attempt to rebuild triggered alerts that ensured their history remained relevant. The best part, Diana confided during the reception, is that they did it to themselves. Every piece of evidence we used was something they created. Their own actions condemned them. Thomas's methodical destruction of his betrayers had become a case study in multiple fields: military strategy, corporate security, even psychological warfare. Students analyzed how he'd systematically eliminated every possible avenue of recovery. Grace's attempt to write a blog about healing from public shaming had backfired when readers discovered her identity. The comments section filled with veterans sharing stories about deployed soldiers whose families had betrayed them. Steve's psychiatrist had published an anonymous case study about the psychological impact of justified social extinction. Even with identities concealed, military readers had recognized the story, adding their own perspectives on betrayal's consequences. As Thomas drove his family home from the academy graduation, he reflected on the past 5 years. His enemies had expected him to react like a wounded man seeking revenge. Instead, they'd faced a strategic expert ensuring betrayal carried permanent consequences. We're having dinner with the film producers next week, Jessica mentioned. They want to discuss the documentary series about long-term consequences of betrayal. Nathan had already read the preliminary script. They're calling it The Wolf's Legacy. How one soldier redefined justice. Thomas smiled, satisfied. His response to betrayal had evolved beyond personal revenge into a systematic approach to justice. Future generations would learn from his enemy's destruction, understanding that betrayal's consequences extended far beyond the initial act. The sun set behind them as they drove home, another day ending in the life they'd built from betrayal's ashes. In their wake lay the scattered remains of those who'd thought they could betray a soldier without consequences. Ahead lay a future built on honor, strength, and the unshakable certainty that justice, properly managed, was the ultimate weapon against betrayal. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.